Fashion on four wheels.
It was 66 years ago that just over 700,000 cars rolled off assembly lines in the UK. British car makers put in their worst performance since then in 2022. New figures show today, hit by a global semiconductor shortage and COVID supply chain issues.
So the shortage of semiconductors that we're experiencing now is really pandemic related. It's a hangover from the pandemic, and it is a global issue. It is not just affecting UK car manufacturers. So manufacturers all over the world are experiencing problems getting hold of these critical chips, and there are a lot of them in cars, which has obviously had a really big impact on their ability to produce the vehicles and the quantities to meet demand.
But they've also been beset by domestic closures too. Honda shutting its Swindon plant and moving production instead to China, Japan and the US. Vauxhall also paused its Ellesmere operations as it gets ready to switch fully electric. Last year, car manufacturing hit a low not seen since 1956, with just 775,000 cars built, a steep decline since 2016, and long short of the record in 1972 of nearly 2 million cars built. In Europe, noses are already out of joint at the US's weapon to jumpstart growth. President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act subsidises electric car makers and green energy firms, and it gives tax breaks to consumers buying US-made electric cars.
Protectionism hinders competition and innovation and is detrimental to climate change mitigation. We, as EU members, are talking to our American friends about this. And at the same time, we are looking at what we ourselves can do to further improve investment conditions here in Europe.
Today, UK Trade Minister Greg Hands met the chair of the EU's Committee on International Trade to discuss, he said, shared concerns on the US's Inflation Reduction Act. But the EU is considering relaxing its own state aid rules, something the UK can do too now it's left the bloc. But will it?
I think there's certainly a possibility that the UK loses out if both the US and the EU, as it looks like they're going to do, decide to invest large sums of money in developing essentially an electric vehicle industry and its supply chain. We don't have the same fiscal capacity as either the US or the collective of countries within the European Union. So we can't, in sort of plain English, we can't throw as much money at the industry, or at least we don't want to.
The silver lining in today's figures, the UK made more electric vehicles than ever before last year, with almost a third now fully electric or hybrid. With the government planning for all production to be electric by 2030, the workforce needs to transition, and fast. But the key stumbling block is battery production. Just last week, battery startup British Volt collapsed before it even became operational. While 35 battery plants are being planned and built in the EU, the UK boasts just one.
Well, our economics reporter Neil MacDonald is here. Neil, how important is this for the UK economy?
Well, car production in the UK may be at its lowest level for decades, but it remains a very important industry to the UK. So 182,000 people are employed making cars and vans, and these are largely well-paid positions, so the pay is 30% higher than the national UK average. So these are well-paid jobs, and of course they're outside mainly the southeast of England, they're in the West Midlands, they're in the northeast. And the whole levelling up agenda has to be about not just creating new opportunities, but of course retaining the jobs that already exist. And in the car industry, retaining jobs is about how we avoid getting squeezed out of this generational switch away from fossil fuels and towards electricity. And this isn't just about building the cars, but also about the batteries. These batteries are heavy pieces of equipment, and many people in the industry think that wherever the batteries get made is where the cars are going to end up being made.
So when you look to the future, is it secure?
Well, the car industry says it expects production to go up in the next couple of years, but there are questions after that, as Amelia was explaining in her piece. So obviously we want to attract green car investment, but so does everyone else in the world. And the United States last year put a very big number on the table that's really sharpened the debate for everyone. So we're talking about $369 billion of incentives for US households to cut their carbon emissions by, for example, buying electric cars. And at the time, President Bush said all of it would be made in the USA. Now, the European Union can see the danger of this basically sucking the global car industry effectively inside the United States. They want to negotiate changes. There's talk of them even setting up their own fund. So it does look like the UK is going to be caught between these two massive trade powers. Between
President Biden's big words, where does that leave us?
Well, that's what the UK car industry wants to know. I mean, the UK government says that there have been successes at attracting electric investment. But the UK industry says that we have to recognise that we have to become much more competitive because of these decisions, and we have to come up with what they call a really compelling offer if we want foreign investors to bring electric car production and electric battery production here to the UK.
Neil, thanks very much.